I've had this Tudor Black Bay 54 for less than 24 hours, but I think that's a good time to share one's initial thoughts because first impressions matter, and definitely that's the case with watches. And some of those first impressions for me are things which I never found or discovered when doing what most of you probably do, which is reading every review and looking at every video that exists on the internet for a model before buying it. So I thought I'd share some of those perhaps less spoken of talking points. I have to say this is my first Tudor, and the overall impression is very positive. It doesn't feel like a step down from some of the more expensive brands, but it does definitely feel like a step up from some of the lesser brands. So clearly the work of mass production and economies of scale are working here. And this model appealed to me because of the smaller case size, 37mm of the Black Bay 54. And I won't repeat everything you will already know if you're watching this video about the watch and the vintage inspiration, etc. I just want to give you perhaps 5 or 6 pros and 5 or 6 cons based on my initial impressions. So as I've talked about before, I have a 16 centimeter wrist, so you can see how this wears, which I think is pretty much perfect and the best you're going to get in a modern dive watch. And this of course is very close into my wrist, and you can see the lugs don't overlap my wrist, and of course when you get a mirror shot it looks much smaller anyway. It's a great go anywhere, do anything watch, and the appeal of this for me is perhaps to knock the thing which I'm sure I share with a lot of you, the constant hunting for a watch. And maybe I'm giving myself a false illusion that I can knock that on the head for a while by wearing this for a couple of years, because it can pretty much do everything right. You get the vintage look and the size with all of the modern movement and water sealing, etc. Anyway, let me get to the point. What I like of my first impressions. So the first one is, yes, it has a sapphire glass, but it's a domed sapphire, right? So you get that really nice aesthetic where you can see it bends the light at the outside of the crystal. So when you see the lume pips there slightly distorting, it's very, very nice. More so in real life, so I think you will appreciate that. And also, people don't really talk about this, but because it doesn't have a stepped crystal, it makes the watch appear a lot thinner. So when you look down the wrist there, right, it's for a diver, it's a very slim watch. It might say 11.5mm or something on the specs, but it feels a lot slimmer because of the separation between the polished side, which might get some scratches, but not too worried about that. The bezel there, and then the crystal are all separated, so you really only think the watch is 8 to 9mm, which is pretty tremendous for an automatic watch with these specifications. And that thin profile is the next thing that I really like about the watch, especially when I've tried on some of the other slab-sided Black Bays, some of the more modern Rolexes. I don't think I'll ever own a new super case Rolex. They're just too large, especially when you have a 16 centimeter wrist. One of the reasons why I also bought this was because when I look for a watch these days, perhaps a combination of wearing a gold wedding band and also perhaps getting a little bit older, I do like a bit of gold on a watch to give me an aesthetic that I like. So the gold writing on the dial and the gold indices, I feel it sort of complements nicely my ring, and it also adds a bit of interest to the watch. I don't think I would have bought it if it was just pure white and black. So I really like that. I know some people don't. Some people really want a more plainer version, and I get that, right? Because there is a little bit of confusion there between it being a dive watch and it having gold on it, especially when some people interpret the gold as sort of faux vintage, which I suppose it is if we're being honest, but that can add to the potential confusion of a watch. But just to build on that, I mean, for example, if I saw this watch, if Tudor released a version in two-tone, with gold accents elsewhere, I would probably buy that. So I'm not particularly in sort of team diver has to be a tool watch. but I appreciate that there are plenty of people that are. One thing that's really struck me, and maybe this is because I've not had a dive watch for a while. In fact, I've never owned a Submariner. I've owned Seamasters in the past. It's just the legibility. You know, when you're used to wearing watches with pencil hands and, you know, oysters and dress watches, having a watch like this with the snowflake hour hand, it's really nice, especially with the loom of a modern watch, which is super effective. You know, straight away you glance at your wrist, bang, you know what the time is. And that sounds silly to say it. People often rebut that by saying, oh, how long does it take to look at the hour hand, etc. But with this watch, you know straight away, there's no discrepancy between the hour hand and the minute hand. And I really like that. It just adds to that sort of, it's just really functional, as well as being nice to look at. Yes, the Lollipop second hand is great as well. You know, super smooth, of course, as modern movement. I do like that. I'm not particularly fussed about it being, you know, non-snowflake there. Okay, what's next? The clasp adjustment. I mean, again, this is the benefits of a modern watch, right? And I've not experienced Tudor's T clasp before, but it's very, very good. I mean, I can close my eyes, I can adjust this, I can, you know, make it a few notches smaller, bigger. It's currently quite hot in the UK, and my wrist has expanded a little bit, so I can size it appropriately. Again, this is something that when you get a modern watch and you have that, and you're used to wearing more vintage pieces, you think, wow, you know, this is really something I like, and it's quite hard to go back. So yeah, they've done a really good job there. Better, of course, than even a Rolex 5mm Easy Link. Another thing which I didn't see mentioned, which I actually like, but maybe of interest to you. Notice how when I bend the bracelet down, the total lug-to-lug size, which I think is something like 46 or 47mm, I'd have to look it up, I'm not too sure about that, but the total lug-to-lug length is the real length that you see on the wrist, and that's because the end links, they sit inside of the end of the lugs, right? You know, on some Rolex models, the end links protrude and don't go fully down, and that really can change how a watch fits. So this adds to it works well on a small wrist. So when you put it on your wrist, the bracelet can go straight down. It's not protruding off that way or protruding off that way, which you do get, and can result in, you know, like a 51mm true lug to lug, which makes some watches with Rolex super cases unsuitable for small wrists. But this one of the pros I'm calling out here is the full flexibility in the first link after the solid end link. I'm sure I'll get flamed for this one. It's obvious, but as somebody that owns and wears Rolexes, it's nice not to have a Rolex on your wrist, because you know, you never get into a conversation about watches. Oh, what watch is that? It's a Rolex, right? It's got so many connotations associated with it. It's kind of a silly one to mention, but I thought I would. I do like you know, having a watch which doesn't have that stereotype associated with it, but that's probably for me to get over rather than being a pro. And yeah, I am getting the vibe that this could be your, you know, buy it and wear it forever watch. It kind of does everything. It hasn't got a date, but I'm personally of the opinion that diver watches shouldn't have a date. I think a date would potentially not add to this watch in a good way. Okay, let's change topics and go on to the negatives, or some of the cons, and some of these are not mentioned in the material that I reviewed. The first one, which was mentioned, but I'm going to mention again, is the crown, right? There is absolutely no reason that Tudor should have made this crown so small. They should have made it larger like the other Black Bay models. It does detract from usage. Thankfully, it's an automatic, so you don't have to use it very much, but it is just too small. It doesn't feel nice to wind. Similarly, the bezel, right? It's quite hard to get some purchase on the bezel. And when you get it moving, it feels nice, very, very precise. I use the bezel a lot more than using the crown, obviously. You do find that when you have a dive watch, you find yourself using it to time things like, oh, how long, I'll give you a funny example, how long do the children have left on their Xbox session? I like that, but getting some purchase on that, I'm not sure if they could have made that any better without making the bezel stick over the side of the case more. Maybe they could have done something with the knurling, I don't know, but it doesn't feel nice. This is definitely not a watch that you would want to dive with and use the bezel with wet hands or with gloves on. That's just not going to work. This one has jumped out at me, and I've not seen it mentioned, is the bracelet. And this is a point of contention, the bracelet design in general, which I'll come on to. But notice how you have the 20mm lug spacing, and then you have your first link, which steps down. And then this link steps down again in terms of size, and then this link steps down again. It's not tapered, right? It's quite a harsh step, right? That's the design. It's rectangle, rectangle, rectangle. Whereas on most Rolex Oyster bracelets, it's tapered all the way down. Now, of course, this is the style, right? It's the tool, sort of utilitarian aesthetic they were going for with the rivets. But it's not something that I love, right? You rub your hands along it, and it's like it's a step, basically. The profile is of steps, not of a curve. I probably prefer an Oyster bracelet on this. I know there's third-party options, but I don't dislike it enough to do that. I know you can also get Jubilee bracelets for these, and because they've just announced the new Black Bay 54 with turquoise dial, which comes on a Jubilee, I assume we'll be able to order a Jubilee for this now. I don't know if a Jubilee would work. It would probably be more comfortable, but again, there's that tension there between a diving tool watch versus a Jubilee being, more dressy. The rivets don't bother me. They do bother some people. What bothers me more is when you look down at the links because of the rivet design. The rivets are designed to hold that cap on the side of the link. I don't love that. I prefer, again, an Oyster style where it's all one complete outer portion of the link, but you get that border. I don't think it looks great. I would prefer it without rivets, but it's not the end of the world. You can see that I'm wearing it with 4 links here at the 6 o'clock side, which I need to with my wrist size. You might find, if you have an even smaller wrist, you might find you still have too many links and you can't go smaller because look, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the clasp is just about centered on my wrist. But if you had a smaller wrist, you would end up with the clasp being over this way, which might feel uncomfortable. So I'd recommend testing it if you can. And then on the negatives, here's another one. You don't get any half links included, right? All of the links you get, of which you get quite a lot, this would size up to a large wrist. Every one is a full link. What that means, and what is the case for me, is with a certain amount of links, it sizes to the point where you need to have the T-link all the way in, and therefore when you're wearing it, you can't go any tighter. And if you take that link out and put the easy link to the max setting, it fits you, but then you can't go any looser. So what I need and what I've ordered is a half link from Uncle Straps to get this size properly. So just watch out, you might need a half link depending on how your wrist is sized and how it fits the bracelet. And the last one that I don't like is, I think this has been called out by some other people on YouTube, there's too much text going on at the bottom there. They should really have got rid of probably officially certified or something, just 2 lines of gold text. But really I'm sort of really nitpicking here. The dial is actually really, really nice. That gold railroad track on the outer is lovely, the gold accents. Some people say the watch looks slightly brown on the dial in sunlight. I've not seen that, but it is a very nice looking dial. And at the moment, this is definitely in the the keeper camp for now. I'm going to keep wearing it, wear it on a holiday coming up soon, and then not worry about how I use it. You know, jump in the sea. Don't worry about if you get thrown in the swimming pool with the kids. That's the beauty of a modern watch, right? Anyway, if you were considering this model, I hope you found this video useful and learned something new. If you have any questions, let me know. See you next time.